Among the flurry of fists and feet, one opponent defies the unspoken rules of our dance. He rises again and again, each time more determined, his eyes locking onto mine with a challenge that stirs something primal within me.
Welcome to Ephemeral Eyes. Warning: this story contains scenes of misguided enthusiasm and questionable life choices. Look, I made some mistakes. Big ones. But hey, it makes for a compelling story, right? Join me as I navigate the aftermath of bad decisions. Try, emphasis on try, to figure out how to be a better human and learn that violence is never the answer. P.S. If you're looking for the really gritty version, click that little card up there.
The stadium's a powder keg, and I'm right there in the thick of it, heart thumping to the rhythm of chants and cheers. It's more than a game. I watch, not for the love of the sport, but for the pulse of the crowd, the tension building like a storm on the horizon. Their side scores, a slick move that has our lot up in arms, cursing the ref, calling it a sham. It's like a spark in dry grass. The anger, the outrage. I feel it, the injustice of it all, fueling the fire within, my thoughts already turning to the clash that will come after, where real scores are settled. The ref's decisions, one-sided, blind to their fouls, only stoke the flames. Each whistle, each wrong call, it's a call to arms, a rallying cry for the post-game reckoning. I can almost taste it, the fight, the fury. But the game's got its own drama, its own suspense. My team, pushing back, fighting for every inch, but luck's not on our side today. The final whistle blows, and it's like a release, a signal. We lost, but it ain't over, not by a long shot. The stand's empty, a sea of bodies moving with a single purpose. They're locked, they're smug, singing their victory songs, but their eyes, they're cautious, wary. We exchange glares, taunts, the air crackling between us. But there's an unspoken rule, a line not yet crossed. There's a burning inside, a fury directed at those who don't understand, who've never felt the rush of standing your ground, of trading blow for blow. Yet beneath the surface, there's this gnawing, this unacknowledged dread of being exposed, of standing bare before a world I can't fathom, forced to speak when all I know is how to strike. Then it's like the world fast forwards. The brawl, the chaos, it's all a blur, a rush of adrenaline and instinct. And then, silence, a sudden calm. I'm back in my flat, the noise of the day a distant echo. The place feels smaller somehow, cluttered with memories and trophies of fights past. I flick the telly on, then off. The screens glow too harsh, too real. The walls close in, filled with the echoes of my own thoughts. I sit, the day's pain a dull ache in my bones, and I think, really think, about the field, the fights, and the scars they leave behind. It's in these quiet moments, the calm after the storm, that I find a strange kind of peace. A moment of clarity in a life lived in the shadows of rage and rebellion. The days without a game go by, and I don't live. I can't live. They are empty and they hurt. I lock in the morrow from time to time, seeing nothing. I was a man once. I will be a man again. In the thrumming aftermath of another game, the pitch becomes my proving ground once more. This time, there's a shift, a descent. The brawls are no longer just an outlet. They're a study, a deliberate dance of destruction. My fists instruments of clarity in a world muddled by pretense. Each blow I land strips away the facade, the hatred, a constant venom in my veins, turning every strike into a declaration of disdain, not just for them, but for a part of me I refuse to acknowledge. The monotony of my day job, a nondescript blur of menial tasks, becomes bearable only when I let my mind wander to the violence that awaits. The clatter and chatter around me fade to a distant hum as visions of the fray take hold. I see the others, my co-workers, as nothing more than sheep, blissfully ignorant of the chains that bind them to their pitiful existences. They don't know the liberation that comes from embracing the beast within. It's at the next game, amidst the roaring crowds and the electric tension, that I find myself detached, an observer rather than a participant. The outcome of the match is irrelevant. It's the aftermath that calls to me, a siren song of chaos and catharsis. And when the violence erupts, it's like I'm seeing it all for the first time. My comrades in arms, once brothers, now merely shadows flanking my descent. Among the flurry of fists and feet, one opponent defies the unspoken rules of our dance. He rises again and again, each time more determined, his eyes locking onto mine with a challenge that stirs something primal within me. The fight becomes a singular duel, the noise of the others fading away as this one adversary consumes my focus. His resilience is unnerving, his refusal to stay down, a mirror to a part of myself I've long denied. With each of his falls and rises, a creeping dread takes hold, a realization of what I've become, what I've always been. The final confrontation is inevitable, a collision course set the moment our eyes met. My hand, guided by a mix of rage and fear, finds its mark. The impact a sickening confirmation of the line I've crossed. The duel with my unyielding adversary escalates, each exchange more brutal than the last. His resilience, a silent taunt, drives me to a darker edge. I watch, almost detached, as my fists become instruments of destruction. As the duel between us intensifies, each exchange of blows more brutal than the last, the reality of the damage inflicted becomes gruesomely clear. His face bears the marks of the fight, swollen and bloodied. His eyes, barely open, reveal a mix of pain and defiance. Sweat and dirt that coat his skin paint a portrait of resilience born of desperation. His breathing grows laboured, a wet, rattling sound that speaks of more than just physical exhaustion. Each inhale seems to draw on the very limits of his endurance, a testament to the internal havoc wrought by our confrontation. The final stand, a moment suspended in the chaos, sees him wavering, a figure both broken and unyielding. The air between us thick with the electric charge of impending finality. I can see the pulse throbbing perilously at his temple. A strike aimed with a cold, clinical precision, born of the fury and fear that has fueled our dance. Back in the silence of my apartment, the adrenaline ebbs, leaving behind a void. The quiet is oppressive, a stark contrast to the tumult of the day. It's here, slumped over a bowl of forgotten cereal, that the day's events replay in the dark theatre of my mind, a macabre reflection of the chaos within. The peace I once found in these solitary moments now eludes me, replaced by an echo of the violence that's become my only solace. Back at work, the world feels off-kilter, the routine of my job as a warehouse operative, a role demanding little thought but constant motion, now a backdrop to the haunting visage of the man I may have destroyed. Boxes and pallets blur into insignificance as his battered face invades my every moment of stillness. A shout at what I think is his shadow turns to mortification as the figure whirls around, a stranger with no connection to the violence of that night, confusion and fear etched into his features. My supervisor's sharp reprimand for my lapse jolts me back to the present, his words a distant echo as my mind spirals further. "Focus, or you're out," he barks, his impatience with my daydreaming clear. But his voice fades, drowned out by the louder questions tormenting my soul. What does death mean? To snuff out a life, to be the arbiter of an end so final. These thoughts once held no weight in my mind, dismissed with the same indifference I reserved for the victims of my rage. But now, death's gravity anchors me, the potential finality of my actions a spectre that looms ever larger. The face of the man I might have killed haunts my dreams, a silent accuser in the court of my own making. Where once I saw death as an abstract, an endpoint unworthy of fear or consideration, now the spectre of it clings to me, a cloak woven from the threads of guilt and uncertainty. His visage is a constant reminder of the thin line between existence and oblivion, a line I danced upon with reckless abandon, never considering the abyss on the other side. At the next game, my heart races with a mix of anxiety and anticipation, a stark contrast to the usual thrill of impending violence. The crowd's roar fades into a distant murmur as I spot him across the stands. Impossibly, the man I'd beaten to the brink of death, looking unscathed, untouched by any sign of our last encounter. I push through the crowd, driven by a need for answers, for closure. As I approach, his eyes meet mine, a flicker of recognition, or is it amusement, passing through them. "Who are you?" I demand, my voice a mix of anger and confusion. "How are you here, looking like nothing ever happened?" He smiles, an enigmatic, unsettling curve of the lips. "The real question isn't about my wounds, but about the ones you carry inside. The ones that drive you to seek solace in rage, in violence." I recoil slightly, taken aback by his words, a part of me wanting to deny them, another recognizing their truth. "What do you know about my pain?" I challenge, my fists clenching at my sides. "More than you realize," he responds calmly. "Pain, anger, they're often just the outer layers of a deeper hurt, one rooted in the unhealed traumas of your past." His words trigger flashes of my last brawl, the visceral satisfaction of my fists connecting, the fleeting escape from the turmoil within. "You don't know anything about me," I spit out, struggling to maintain my composure. "On the contrary, I see the child within you, still fighting for a voice, for validation, in the only way he knows how, through conflict and chaos." His insight cuts deeper than any physical wound could, stirring a tumult of emotions I've long suppressed. "Why are you saying these things?" I ask, my voice barely a whisper, the anger giving way to a confused vulnerability. "Because sometimes, the hardest battles are the ones we fight within ourselves. Recognizing the source of your pain is the first step towards healing." As he speaks, my mind is pulled back to the fight, to the moment my fist connected with flesh, a desperate attempt to silence my inner demons. How do I move past this? The question escapes me before I can hold it back, a plea from the part of me yearning for release from this cycle of self-destruction. By confronting your past, by acknowledging the wounds that fuel your rage. It's a journey, not a battle, a path towards understanding and eventually peace. His words hang in the air, a beacon in the fog of my confusion. As I raise my fist, driven by a reflex to reject this unsolicited introspection, he calls my name, a final plea to see beyond the veil of my own anger. But as my fist swings through the space he occupied, connecting with nothing but air, I stumble, falling to the cold, hard ground. I look up breathless, but he's gone, leaving me with nothing but the echo of his words and the haunting realization of the war I've been waging against myself. Dragged along by the current of my so-called friends, I find myself back at the field, the stage set for another post-game brawl. But something's different this time. The fire that once fueled my fists feels like it's been doused in cold water. I move through the motions, a shadow among shadows, each punch I throw lacking the fervor, the hunger that once defined me. The blows I receive in return land with a clarity I've never felt before. Each one a stark reminder of the path I've chosen, a path paved with pain, both given and received. Then, as if snapped out of a trance, I find myself alone in the dim light of my apartment. The static hum of the TV filling the silence. The screen blurs before my unfocused eyes. A meaningless cacophony of colours and sounds that fades into the background as my thoughts drift inward. For the first time, I allow myself to truly contemplate redemption, the possibility of a life beyond the violence and rage that have been my constant companions. The concept feels foreign, almost alien, yet there's a part of me, perhaps the part that's been buried under layers of hurt and anger, that yearns for it. I think about what it might mean to build something lasting, something not founded on the transient thrill of a fight or the fleeting escape of a drunken stupor. The idea of being someone capable of love, of being loved in return, emerges from the fog of my consciousness like a beacon. It's a daunting thought, laden with the fear of the unknown and the weight of a past I'm not sure I can escape. But in this moment of quiet introspection, it feels like the only real fight worth fighting. A battle not against others, but for myself. For the chance to redefine who I am and what I stand for. The static from the TV fades into the background, a mere backdrop to the internal dialogue that's begun to unfold. A dialogue about change, about hope, and about the daunting yet irresistible challenge of starting anew. At work, the machinery's rhythmic hum blends with a newfound sense of purpose. My movements are deliberate, each task completed with a focus I never knew I possessed. The weight that's pressed down on me for so long feels lifted, each breath a testament to a freedom found not in the chaos of a brawl, but in the simple act of living, of being present in the moment. A colleague, one of the lads I used to stand shoulder to shoulder with in the stands and on the fields, sidles up to me during a break. "Big game this weekend," he says with a nudge. "You pumped for the after show?" His grin is expectant, the unspoken anticipation of violence hanging between us. I pause, the question hanging in the air like a cloud. "Not sure I'll make it," I reply, my voice even, my eyes not meeting his. The confusion on his face is palpable, a silent question mark that I have no intention of answering. The day takes a terrifying turn when the police arrive, their presence a cold shock that cuts through the factory's din. My heart races as they lead me away, the curious and concerned stares of my co-workers burning into my back. In the interrogation room, the air is thick with accusation. The officers lay out their case with clinical detachment, speaking of a man found lifeless on a field. His injuries are silent testament to the violence he endured. They talk of witnesses, of CCTV footage that places me at the scene, but admit the evidence falls short of conclusive. Then they show me the pictures, and the world narrows to those images of brutality, of a life extinguished by my hands. The dam breaks, and I find myself weeping, a torrent of grief and guilt for a man I never knew, for the life I took, and for the soul that now rests heavy on my conscience. The officers watch, their expressions unreadable, waiting for a confession that hangs on the tip of my tongue. In that moment, torn between self-preservation and the crushing weight of my actions, I'm faced with a choice that will define the rest of my life. To run from what I've done, to hide in the shadows of half-truths and lies, or to step into the light, to own the darkest part of myself and face the consequences. The room feels impossibly small, each breath a struggle against the tide of my own emotions.
If the story made you think, hit that like button. Want to support the journey towards being a less chaotic human? Subscribe. I say this again. Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones we fight within ourselves. And hey, I'd love to see you again, friend.